Hi, I'm Sanni. Coming up next on the forum, we'll be talking about overcoming racism in the community. Good afternoon. My name is Sanni Brown, and you are watching SPNN's Forum. I have here with me today Andre Koen.
Yes.
All right, I said it right.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
And he is representing a community dialogue that is discussing racism. But before we get into all of that, let's get a little background about where you're coming from and how you got to where we're here today.
Yeah. So the funny thing is that I don't know about how your parents raised you, but my parents raised me that the world was an equitable place, that if you worked hard enough, you could achieve anything. And unfortunately, what they also didn't tell me was that there were some obstacles that were somewhat insurmountable. That there were some folks who would not like my advancement, would try to hold me back. Some of those folks looked like me, and some of those folks didn't look like me.
Right.
And so the hard knocks of life really started to teach me some of the things that my parents didn't teach me, or expose me into things that my parents didn't expose me to, or didn't want to talk about. So my parents were birthed from folks who grew up in Tennessee in the 30s and 40s, and back in those days, my grandfather made some very specific decisions that allowed me to be born, and one of those was not to buck the system, not to be a rebel rouser. His name was John, and all too often people would call him George because John was too difficult to say. And as a man, they would refer to him as boy because mostly they could.
Right.
And so
that was the norm.
That was the norm. And so my grandfather made choices to not speak up, not buck the system, but keep his head down and do his job so that I could be born. And so he had my father, and my father was, during the 60s, he saw all the turmoil in the United States, and he recalled the assassination of Dr. King as a pivotal point for him. And so when he became of age, he joined a group of troublemakers, as some folks, or freedom fighters, as other folks would describe them, the Black Panthers. And so he became a Panther until he got a call from God. And God called him to be an evangelical pastor. And so in my upbringing, I've had that political activism as a huge part of my growing up, as well as understanding the spiritual relationship between, or responsibility for, that social activism. And so in my personal life, I've really sought to balance those things, that the political aspects of understanding race and discrimination and oppression, as well as the spiritual aspects of how all of our souls are knitted together. Right. And that we can only be human when we're in relationship with each other, and our humanity is stunted when we're not.
Right.
And so that's shaped a lot of my philosophy in terms of the work that I do personally, and my professional aspirations have been really influenced by those particular events in my family's history. And so when we talk about community dialogues, I think it's extremely important to engage everyone in the community in the dialogue. So that's kind of what has led me to have conversations with you today.
Okay, so how would you describe what you're doing right now as a speaker, as a organizational speaker, a motivational speaker? How would you?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question and dilemma, because I think I am all of those things, but not limited by those things.
Okay.
And so I'd like to think of myself as an enkindled spirit, and that my responsibility is to light the wicks of ideas, to light the wicks of awakening people's spirits, that to empower other people. So do I do motivational speaking? Yeah. Do I do diversity training? Yeah. But I'm not limited by those things. I really see the work and the call upon my life to really engage people in relationship. That part of what I'm asked to do, or my responsibility, is to reconcile people to each other, and ultimately reconcile them back to their center, from where they've come.
I know you said that you have a political background based on your father and your grandfather, but was there something that happened to you specifically that made you say, diversity is what I want to talk about?
Yeah, and the ironic thing
is it just growing up being a black man? Is it?
I think part of the journey started out being a black man until I realized that I'm not black. When I realized that I was a human being,
right,
that I transcend this racial construct that is artificially created to limit or to direct my path.
Right.
Once I was able to kind of transcend that, but at the same time understand that other people haven't transcended that
at the same level,
at the same level and at the same time. And so I would say that through my journey, I started out doing things with the Anti-Defamation League.
Okay.
I started doing trainings as a young person with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond out of New Orleans, Louisiana. I've participated in all these diversity cadres and lessons and theories and philosophies that have really led me to one thing, that at the end of the day, what is most important is that we become whole human beings.
Yep.
And so when I look at commercials, when I look at the effects of capitalism, when I look at the global impacts of colonialism, what I see are these systems that are designed to rip away people's humanity so that we can sell them a fictitious and illusionary solution or answer to their deficits, when the only true answer is being a whole person.
Right.
And so when we start having these community dialogues, it's important that when I say everybody at the table, everybody at the table.
Right.
One of the biggest misconceptions, particularly of our white brothers and sisters, is that racism is either a thing of the past or that it is something that does not directly affect them.
Anybody, right.
And so one of the things that this community dialogue is encouraging folks to do is have honest and true conversations about the impacts of racism and oppression. One of the things that white folks don't understand is that all white people aren't created equal. And you can listen to white people talk about that themselves, because white people have a name for white people who don't measure up to what it means to be white. And typically those names are words like redneck, white trash, or sometimes teasingly refer to each other as cracker. And so what that suggests is, even among white folks, there's not an equity. There's not a one thing that it means to be white. And so go ahead.
I love that you said this. I run a Facebook page, and I try to have discussions about diversity for human beings to come together and voice the struggles that they're going to with regards to race and whether race exists or not. And I love that you said that among white people there is an inequality that's going on. And we were talking about just recently they were deciding to have a white woman featured on Jet magazine or Essence magazine, and the discussion was, should that be okay, or should black magazines be catered only to African American women? And there was a white woman who said, we're not treated equal either. I don't look like the models that are on these magazines, so I really love that you said that. It really hits home. Yeah. And you don't hear that. So no.
And here's the ironic thing about black magazines, right? So oftentimes in some of my trainings, I have people who are disturbed by the fact that there are black magazines like Essence or Ebony or Jet, or that black people have a a television station referred to as BET, Black Entertainment Television. And one of the things that I remind them in the conversation is that oftentimes the dominant system scapegoats people who have figured out ways to survive and then blames them for their survival. Okay. And so oftentimes Black people get particularly African American people, Black people, get slammed because these magazines exist. When people don't realize the overall context of the existence, what the Johnsons created was in response to the fact that there weren't Black people in popular magazines. Right. That there weren't videos being played on MTV. And so, and there weren't colleges where Black people were being educated equitably. And so folks started creating their own, and now that time has passed, people blame particularly African Americans as being separatists when they wouldn't let us play in the game in the first place. And so, so should a white woman be on those covers? Sure, why not? One of the things that we've understood about the media is that the conglomerates, the 3 or 4 owning big companies, conglomerates, they really don't care about anyone. I think it's deplorable when we think about what media, advertisers, clothing makers try to tell us about ourselves. Right. I found a new phenomenon that really startled me. And for women, there's a new sizing kind of thing going on, and I was surprised to see that there's a woman's size 0. Why
are you shocked about that? I've heard 0 most of my life.
Really?
Why are you shocked about that there's a size 0?
Because what does that say to women in terms of your positionality in life, who you are? And then there's, if I'm not mistaken, there's a 000.
Okay, I've never heard of a 000.
Okay, 00. And if I'm, and I will go out on a limb, but I think my niece got a -1 outfit.
Really?
Yeah, crazy.
What store was this from?
I can't,
you don't know.
I get sued, girl. People sue. Right?
That's crazy, 00 and -1, but I understand what you're saying.
But you understand the principle,
the message that they're sending, that doesn't, to me, I hear that's not normal to me. It's not. My issue with that is that I try to understand that there are a variety of sizes. So if there is a size 0, I don't want to leave them out either.
But what does 0 represent? It represents nothing.
Right.
There is not a person on this planet that is a size nothing.
Right.
And so part of taking back our humanity is having conversations. And so these community dialogues about overcoming racism are extremely important because all too often we have segments and folks who are working on anti-racism, which is cool, and I appreciate the work that they're doing, but you're telling me what I'm fighting against. I want to know what I'm fighting for. Right? And so I am fighting for the humanity of people. And so overcoming racism is an extremely important concept because it is an obstacle that we hurdle. It is an obstacle that we transcend, that we go past. Go ahead.
The very fact that you don't believe in race and that we are humans, why call it overcoming racism? Is it to get to that level of consciousness that you are at?
I think part of it is that. The other part is I have to speak a language, and the people and the folks in my network have to speak a language that other people understand. And so if we start talking all this extra esoteric stuff, then we actually become we don't become effective in how we do that stuff. In my private practice, folks call what I do sensitivity training, diversity training, inclusion training, cultural competence, whatever they need to call it. We'll call it that. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that we create systems that contain the opportunities for people to express their humanity.
Right.
And all these trappings are designed to help strip those things away. But here's the trick about our humanity. Our humanity, can only be expressed when we're in relationships.
Right.
But we never lose our humanity. Sometimes we choose to give it up. Or we allow circumstances to tell us that we're less human than we are innately.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're always human. One of the tricks of the system, the economic system of slavery, was to to keep convincing the people that they were in bondage and break their spirit.
And that's lingering, that's residual to today.
And in many ways, that's residual today. And so really having this deep conversation, because one of the things that my white brothers and sisters are also not cognizant of many times is how they've been tricked into thinking that that they're a part of a system that they're not a part of.
Right. You are watching SPNN's Forum. I have with me Andre Koen, and we are discussing overcoming racism and the theory of race as a whole and humanism. And I have a question about your community dialogues.
Okay, sweet.
Do you ever get people upset about the conversation? Do you ever get people who come in and who are, I mean, of course, you have people that are willing and, like I said, have that level of consciousness that you have, but I know you got to run into some rebel rousers.
Here's the funny thing. So in one of the sessions that I run in my private practice, one of the titles is that Black people are racist too.
Yep.
And in that conversation, I have folks who are ready to fight and defend the fact that they can't be racist.
Okay.
That it is impossible for them to be racist based on a definition that they've been given. And so all too often, the folks that come ready to fight to a number of my sessions happen to be folks who most people would say look like me.
Okay.
And so, yeah, you definitely get folks who this truth about our human existence is too much. It flies in the face of everything that they've thought about the world, what they've been taught about the world, about themselves, and so yeah, you definitely get those. You get those folks, and you also get the folks who want to deny that these things are happening or that these things are in the past, and so sometimes those folks look like me, and sometimes they don't.
What is their reasoning behind feeling that it's impossible to be racist? Yeah.
So in the 90s, there was a book by Joseph Brandt, who and the book is titled Dismantling Racism.
Okay.
And one of the definitions of racism that is used in that book and in other books in the 90s was that race is privilege plus power.
Okay.
And that particularly African Americans or Black people don't have the power to enforce racism.
Okay.
But I come from a school that says you are what you eat. And so if I'm in a racist system, I can't help in some ways being racist.
Right.
And now there may be levels or strata of how that racism looks or whatnot, but I can't participate in a system and not be affected by it.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So no matter what color you're in, if you go dip in the lake, everybody comes out of the lake wet.
Right.
And so when I think about racism in that way, because part of the problem is people have said that it's someone else's fault,
right.
And so I have no responsibility. I have no engagement in that because it's somebody else's problem or someone else's fault. Right. And I want to say we're all in this together. You know, as human beings. One of the things that we also talk about is the concept of free-range chickens. Right?
Yes.
So free-range chickens are very interesting because if you go to any organic store or whatnot and you see these free-range chickens, those things are expensive.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And they are expensive, and they're expensive because the chickens have freedom of movement.
Right.
They're not fed hormones.
Right.
They're typically considered to be healthier.
They're treated better.
They're treated better.
It's a rich version of a chicken.
It's a rich version of a chicken.
Yeah.
And so then we have the caged chicken.
Right.
And the caged chicken typically lives in camped quarters or confined quarters. It's full of drugs, antibiotics, and so forth and so on.
The way in which they dismantle
the way that they hang out, the treatment. They're caged. They're in close proximity. Those two things, and so you have the free-range chicken who has all of these advantages, and then you have the caged chicken that is confined and has limited access to the natural resources. But here's the thing that people stop to or people don't remember, is that whether I'm a free-range chicken and I have all these choices and access to goods, job, services, and money, or I'm a caged chicken with limited opportunities, limited places I can go, we are both chickens.
That's right. That's right.
And so both are designed to be served up on somebody's table.
Right, yeah.
And so all too often we run around like chickens and we fight among ourselves or we blame each other for things, and we never stop to look at the fact that we are on an animal farm. And so what's going on with the farmers? What's going on with other animals? What's happening in India directly impacts us.
Right.
That collapse in India is just as much our fault. Those of us who purchase garments is just as much our fault as it was the negligence of the folks in that particular country. And so when we start thinking about humanity in a real grassroots way, then we can start making some changes.
Right.
We should be just as outraged as about things across the globe as we are about the things that happen in our neighborhood, in our country.
Right. Did you have an aha moment where you had to accept that you were racist yourself?
Yeah.
Have you ever, would you consider yourself to have been a racist? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There are definitely some places and some ways that I've had to work on and stuff I'm still working on, right? So, my friends and I, we tease and we say, well, what if you had a white pastor? That would be tough for me.
Really? Why?
I don't know. It's one of those it's one of those things that I was just like, a white pastor? I never would have
really
thought
stuck?
of that.
That
stuck. I was like, a white pastor? What would that be like to have a white pastor?
That's interesting to see that that's
And of all the things to be concerned about. So I think we all have stuff that we need to work on. The scary part is when people try to deny that they have stuff to work on, or they don't recognize that they have stuff to work on.
Yeah.
And so I think those things become really important because that's how we make those connections. I'm not perfect, but I'm perfecting. I'm not right, but I am trying to correct everything that I do. And that's the important thing. It's that wrestling with that actually makes us stronger.
So you have an event that's coming up regarding overcoming racism.
Yeah.
All right, so talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm a part of a consortium of trainers and community members, and I think it's November 16th and 17th or 15th
and 16th.
15th
That's
and
what
16th.
I saw.
Oh, go ahead, girl. Thank you. At Metropolitan State University, and there'll be a number of wonderful workshops, specifically talking about truth telling. We know that when the hunter tells the story, it's a lot different than when the lion tells the story. And so in this particular this conference, we'll be having lions telling stories and giving folks the opportunity to reshape the narrative. I find it interesting that in 1924, Native Americans were made citizens of the United States. 1924.
Yeah.
So who were the people who received those early pilgrims and early folks? They were not citizens until 1924.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, but it is true. It's part of our American history.
Even you telling me that now, it's kind of took a while to to click. That doesn't make sense, but
so these are truths that don't get
told.
That don't get told.
Yeah.
And so the 100 years between the ending of slavery and people getting equal rights, we don't necessarily talk about what happened in that gap or why that took so long to happen. And so these are the kinds of conversations that get to be had at this particular conference. And so if folks are interested, please come or visit the website, go to the blog, interact with us.
The website?
The website actually we'll have to pull up. I think it's overcommingracism.org.
Okay.
But I'm sure we'll get a banner right here for that website. But yeah, definitely come have the dialogue with us. And if there's a cost associated with that, you can find that on the website. But don't let that cost be a barrier to people coming and having the conversation.
And having honest conversations.
Honest conversations.
That's just, to me, that's liberating. You can't, it's so difficult to go anyplace and have an honest conversation about racism, about being a human, about, it's so difficult, and it's refreshing for me to be able to find that type of round table.
Yeah, and it's an open space to really hear different perspectives other than the typical narrative that we've heard.
Okay, all right. Well, any last thoughts? Anything you want to?
No, I would just encourage folks, even if you can't make it to the conference, start having critical conversations. Start having conversations.
Get in the practice of it.
Get in the practice of it. Be uncomfortable. If you see something that you know is not right in terms of how you were brought up as a kid, stand up and say something. Or ask a question. You don't have to, put yourself in harm's way.
Right.
But it is important to do something, because it is silence that gives bigots and racists and haters of equity the power to keep doing what they do. And so each one of us in our sphere of influence has the responsibility to stand up, to speak up, and to act up.
How do you think people can start that? Because there is a lot of stuff that's going on inside of you for you to even acknowledge that conversation needs to be had.
Yep.
So how would they start that?
Yep. So one of the ways that you start that is you practice in your own family.
Okay.
Just
in your
start
comfort zone.
In your comfort zone.
Right.
Know that the bigoted people that are in your life, the only way you can change them is to love the hell out of them.
Right.
That's the only way you change them.
Right.
And so, and this is funny, because good people like us will have a family member who's politically incorrect.
Yes.
And instead of engaging them, what we do is we cut that family member off.
Yep.
Well, that family member goes off and they find somebody who agrees with their foolishness.
Right, and then it starts to spread.
And then it spreads. They breed and they have other friends. And so, it becomes important to keep those family members close to you, because when you cut them off, what you're saying is,
you're right.
what I believe is not strong enough to overcome what you believe.
Right. And it's important to sharpen iron. That's what I'm
Iron
told.
sharpens iron.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. I enjoyed this conversation.
No, this was fun.
I really enjoyed this.
Anytime, I'm available. So.
All right. So again, the dates for the event that's coming up last time?
Yep, it's November
15th and 16th.
15th and 16th at Metropolitan State University.
Okay.
Overcoming Racism Conference, Truth Telling.
All right, cool. Thank you for coming out.
Oh, so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. My name is Sanni, and you've been watching SPNN Squirrel.